What's in a name? Well, that's the question we want to be answered tonight on this program, following Arts and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa's rejection of all objections to the heavily criticized name changes in the Eastern Cape. Scholars and struggle veterans, Professors Bani Pityana and Mushenkondo, weigh in on the hits and misses of this exercise and remind us of its importance for our country in the first place. But not before Mr. Kensani Maluleke, who is the chairperson of the National Geographic Names Council, takes us through their mandate and fills the gaps in our understanding of how their processes really work. Nelson Mandela Metro Mayor Nqaba Panga is also on standby to tell us about the city's next step following Minister Mthethwa's decision at the weekend to reject all objections. The Watchdog starts right now. Now, to be part of this conversation, you can tweet us on @TheWatchdogSABC. You can also share your views on the SABC News Online Twitter and Facebook pages using the hashtag SABC News. Joining us live from Pretoria, I understand. Please welcome our first guest, National Geographic Names Council Chairperson, Mr. Kensani Maluleke. Good evening, Mr. Maluleke, and thank you so much for your time this evening.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to your viewers as well.
Take us back, if you will, just the composition first of your council. How many councillors do you have? How often do you meet? And just briefly take us through your mandate in the main.
Okay then. Thank you for this opportunity. As you rightly said, I'm Kensani Maluleke, the National Chairperson of Geographical Names Council. In terms of the composition of the committee, we have 5 ministerial appointees, and those ministerial appointees are joined by provincial chairpersons of provincial names committees. And to add unto that, we also have representatives coming from the Post Office, the National Stats Department. There is also a rep from PENSAB. We also have a representative from the Surveyor General. So that's how the committee is constituted. In terms of how we meet 4 times per annum, but we do make provision for 2 other special meetings if there's a need. And we also undertake awareness programs and campaigns, particularly when we induct committees, because part of our mandate is to establish provincial committees. So we do go around inducting those committees as and when they are established. And when needs be, we also go to an extent of going to local government, but it's through the invitation by provincial governments, because the role of provincial committees is to establish local geographical names committees. So 3 tiers of government are represented, where we have LGNCs, which operate at local level and established by provinces, and PGNCs, which are provincial committees established by the National Council, where I'm the chairperson. So that's the composition of council.
Okay. Now, back to the background of our focus this evening. In February, the Minister of Arts and Culture, Minister Nathi Mthethwa, gazetted a number of names: Port Elizabeth to Gqeberha, Utenake to Kariga, King Williamstown to Qonce, East London Airport to King Paulo Airport, Port Elizabeth Airport to Chief David Stirman International Airport. Since then, there has been criticism, people saying, proper processes were not followed. Some just don't like the names, others arguing that it's going to be an expensive exercise, money could be spent elsewhere in service delivery, and so on. Now, when you received the objections. What did you do as an organization?
Maybe from a process point of view, and maybe to clarify something there. As council, we make recommendations to the minister. Yes, following a thorough due diligence. Because remember, this process starts at a provincial level, where consultations are carried out and the due processes are followed. Also, maybe to make this clear to you, provincial committees do not approve names. So is the National Council. Our role, among others, is to make recommendations to the minister after when due diligence has been carried out. So when these names are submitted to the minister, they are based on the thorough work that the committee or the council would have gone through. So the minister, based on that, will then approve or disapprove. And in that process of approving and disapproving, in the event that there are objections, our act in terms of Section 10 makes provision for objections, particularly with regards to subsection 3, which says that any member of society who is not who is dissatisfied about the process, they have a 30-day period to lodge a complaint. So in that process, the minister will then refer the names back to council, because our role it's advisory. We will then go through those names and look at the issues that would have been brought forward by the general public. And I think common questions that people put forward relate to the issue of insufficient consultation. And I think somehow that is mistaken, because we have documentary proof in terms of that those submissions, the meetings that are held, where they were held, who were in attendance. So that information is part of what we look at as council, where we have a checklist, making sure that the necessary information is availed in order for us to make a determination on whether names were submitted in a proper manner. The other question that people do ask relate to a situation where people saying then renaming will drive tourists away. And I am yet to be convinced if that it's really correct, because I think if you look at your president studies, a good example is Johannesburg International Airport, that was subsequently changed to Oliver Tambo International Airport. And that did not deter people from coming to the country. The reason why people visit the country, they want to sample the South African experience. So it really goes beyond the name. And if you look at international level, we have places like Bombay in Mumbai, in India, renamed Mumbai, and that did not change the situation at all in terms of people visiting the country. The same applies to China, where Peking became Beijing. So it's a common practice, and we are a member of United Nations group of experts on geographical names. So we subscribe to the policies, principles, and protocols as outlined by the UN, where the issue of duplication and what have you is taken cognizance of. The other issue then that the public normally raise relates to the issue of name change, wasting money. If you look at how our process unfolds, it starts with maybe a state department or a municipality or an individual making an application to say, I feel that this name needs to be changed. And there is an application form that they complete. They make a submission to whatever authority, be it LGNC or PGNC. and they will then follow the due process in terms of the necessary consultations. The questions that you ask in the application form, it's the origins of the name, the applicant, all the information necessary for us to make the assessment insofar as the application is concerned. So those are some of the things. But insofar as this process going to waste money, I think it's a bit detached from our mandate, because if you look at the objects of council, one of them relates to facilitation of the transformation process. So we are judged as council based on the mandate that we derive from Section 2 of the South African Geographical Names Council Act of 1998. The one last issue that people raise relates to duplication of existing place names, and I think these are quite common in the submissions that we get. So to answer your question, yes, there are quite a number of issues that members of public really raise relating to the issues that I've mentioned, and when we assess those objections, we base that on Section 10 to say that what does Section 10 provides for and work within the ambit of the law, and also guided by Section 9, which deals with powers and duties of council, which clearly outlines where our mandate and what we need to do as council.
Now, I'm just going to take you back to the issues you've raised, several, which you say are the issues that people commonly raise with you. So you are saying that upon your review of how the names were arrived at, you found that one, there was sufficient consultation done at local level in the case of these Eastern Cape names, correct?
Yes, correct. And maybe to give greater clarity on that, when people are invited to come and participate, they ignore the processes and they use the objection period to come up with alternative names. And I need to emphasize that the appeal process does not necessarily constitute making an application, because people tend to sneak in the names to say, in my case, this is the name that I prefer. So in our adjudication, we do look into that to say we really can't allow people to apply indirectly when the due process is there for them to follow.
Oh, okay. And then you're also saying that it is not true that alternative names were ignored, as some people have alleged.
Yes, it's really not true, because if you look at the application form, we make provision for two names, that is the preferred name and alternative name. And based on consultations that take place on the ground, people have an opportunity to object to the preferred name and then consider an alternative name. So what is presented to us emerges as a consensus having come from that consultation process.
Now, on the issue of the concern that some people are raising, that money spent on renaming could be better spent on service delivery, you're saying that is outside of your mandate?
Yes, that is outside of our mandate, because if indeed there was service delivery, I don't think people will be raising this issue to say name change, it's a waste of money. There is, I read somewhere where some economists were saying that the name change process, it's going to cost, or it does cost about 20 million to that effect. As the chairperson of council, I have not been invited to comment on on a study of that nature. So there are a lot of things that are being said without consulting or seeking information from council. So the name change process in terms of wasting money and what have you, I don't think really it's something that our act deals with, to be honest.
Now, I was also going through the handbook, which is your Bible, so to speak, and I came across this line. It is important to standardize names for the purpose of affirming a country's history and national identity, and for purposes such as trade and commerce. So trade and commerce becomes a criteria, something for you to consider as well, isn't it? How difficult has it been to be able to strike that balance between, ensuring, that you affirm our history as a national identity on the one hand, but on the other, you still give due consideration to trade and business issues?
Okay, then I will give an example to that effect, because I think if you have a name or you visit a place, what that name does, it does, I think, I think what the name does, it does afford people to go to a place where they're then able to sample the experience given in that particular country. And I think it raises curiosity to say, why Tebeja, if I were to give an example. And based on that, I think the experience associated with life around that area does become a source of attraction based on what is packaged in that particular area. If we talk about your frontier wars, your what have you, then if you look at the experience that province offers, I think the name, in my view, does maybe bring that appetite for people to visit that particular area. There are quite a number of names that have not been taken into cognizance, that have not been correctly spelled. If you look at the Khoi names, how they're spelled and how they're pronounced, that becomes problematic. And I think it's part and parcel of what we do as council to ensure that the identity of South Africans, it's taken into consideration, particularly when we're addressing issues that relate to decoloniality, because part of what we do in reshaping the landscape of the country is to try and decolonize the country and using symbols, because I think we have good instruments that do allude to this process. If you look at the TRC process, where it makes mention of symbolic reparation, in my view, using a name as a symbol, I think it does address issues that the TRC was able to bring to the fore.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Marulek, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts right there. I want to bring in for a few minutes the mayor of the Nelson Mandela Metro Municipality, just to hear what they have to say now that your recommendation has been accepted by the Minister of Arts and Culture. That interview coming up in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. This is the Watchdog, and joining us now is the Mayor of the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan Council. Mr. Mayor, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. You've heard what the Minister has said, the decision that he has taken. There was sufficient consultation. Alternative names were not ignored. And it's not true The council believes that renaming the places would drive away tourists and so on. So, Rebecca, it is. Your response?
Vuyo, I must put it very clear that our approach on this issue has always been that we're not necessarily opposed to name change, because the transformational aspect of it is so critical. And what we've been saying as a city is that in naming cities, what we need to do, or naming places, we must try and emphasize social cohesion, that we give our places that we name names that would bring people together. And secondly, that part of the responsibility of dealing with the process of name change is to make sure that we restore the historical aspect of these names. For instance, in Gqeberha, in Port Elizabeth, you would have to embrace the element of restoration. And my view is that Gqeberha is not a Xhosa name, and it has no meaning in Xhosa. When I met with the deputy chairperson of the council, in his explanation when I inquired was that Gqeberha derives its meaning from Khoisan. And my view is that if Gqeberha is Khoisan, as the chairperson is saying right now, it must be written in Khoi, because it's a distortion of the language of Khoi. And if we wanted to restore Khoi language, we should have used a correct Khoi language in this regard. And the third thing about what we are opposing is that the consultation, as explained by the chairperson, was not done properly. In the case that the people in these meetings, in their minutes, there are people in the meeting, like in Motherwell, where only 10 people attended. Councillor Desi then stood up and said, this meeting can't continue, and once we have only 10 people who representing 44,000 people in Motherwell. The same thing happened in Unit, where people stood up in the meeting, that this meeting is not properly constituted and we have to do more communicating to people to come to this meeting. The biggest was in City Hall, which was 150, meaning only 363 people participated in this process, and people were raising this issue. Therefore, we are considering a number of issues, Vuyo, as you are asking right now, to deal with this issue. The first one is that we're waiting for the case in Grahamstown that have already been had. And we are considering taking a legal action based on advice, and the lawyers are saying we still have a place to hold on and engage, and therefore we might explore going to court to deal with some of the technical aspects that I've been talking about. And I think even the court process, it's a democratic process which allows us to do that in South Africa if we are not satisfied by certain decisions. And then that's what we're going to do, Vuyo.
Mr. Maruleke, they are entitled to seek whatever recourse from whatever quarter, including the courts, isn't it?
Yes, it will not be for the first time that members of public approach the Court of Laws. It has happened in other parts of the country, including Makado, where the decision to rename was withdrawn, given the fact that it was alleged that the due process was not followed. I concur with the mayor to say that the issue of name change, it's something that people don't contest. And I think if you look at precedent cases, your Makado, your Makanda, the challenge that arises is based on the process and procedures. And in the majority of cases where you find that this the minister does weigh in, I think even the issue of Makanda, the advice that the minister was given to say that the approval process should really go ahead. When he applied his mind, he did pick up some challenges with regards to the Makanda process. And he then reversed the process to ensure that his concerns were really addressed. So for me, then I think it's really an objective process by the minister, where he has the power and the right to challenge some of the decisions that we take as council. It's not like maybe it's a smooth sailing where whatever we recommend to him, he approves. He does, I think, also given his legal team, or legal team in the department, who then look at the legalities in terms of whether our recommendations enjoy or have met the legal test. So those are some of the things that we really make consideration to.
Just to make sure I've got you correctly here, on the other issues that the mayor raised earlier of process, you are still adamant that due process was followed, and you're satisfied as council that you won't be found wanting on that one.
Yes. I think the laws of these countries are, in my view, good enough, because we have a Promotion of Access to Information Act, where I think these documents, which in my view are public documents, can be accessed by whoever has a recourse on the matter.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, last word from you. How soon can we expect the city to make up its mind as to what your next step is going to be?
I must say the advice is that this case in Grahamstown is very critical, and the outcomes of this case in Grahamstown would impact generally on what will happen to these names. And when that judgment is made, we are going to apply our mind on what the outcome is. And if the outcome is favorable, we will then proceed with a legal issue in this. And I must say to you that I've informed the minister when he was here in Port Elizabeth that if the outcomes in Grahamstown do not go according, we must have a conversation instead of fighting about this issue. Transformation and change into our country should be something that is embraced by all of us. And it must not distract us as a nation. It's supposed to bring us together. That's the kind of conversation that the minister, beyond these issues, we must be able, because people must begin to appreciate changes that come. But also government must be willing to listen and to different views. That's how we build a nation, because this is about nation building. This is not about nation destruction. And therefore, I have extended that the minister, beyond these legal challenges, if it goes according to our plan, we must have a conversation instead of fighting for a very long period of time, because it will be distracting the people than bringing them together.
Okay, quick last word from you, Mr. Maluleke. Perhaps you could, in your closing comments, also, help us understand where the problems usually are. In other words, what are the most common problems during this process? What are the mistakes that we all make, which don't make life easy for you?
I think one thing that I would like to emphasize is the issue of public awareness programs, because we do convene those public awareness meetings, and people do not attend. And when there's a need for consultation, people don't attend. They simply dismiss to say this is not going to happen. This name is not going to go away. It's a given. It has been there for a long time. And those that have interest, they do attend, and decisions are made, submissions are made, and we follow the due process based on what our Act prescribes. So I will urge our members to take these public awareness programs very seriously, because they do have an impact on how names come into being. Thank you.
People must participate. Thank you very much, Mr. Kensani Maluleke, who is, of course, the chairperson of the National Geographic Names Council. They did make recommendations to the Arts and Science Minister, who then accepted their recommendations, and the names are not going to change. Port Elizabeth is going to stay Gqeberha, Utenake to Kariga, King Williamstown to Konce, East London Airport to King Paulo Airport, Port Elizabeth Airport to David Stearman International Airport. Now up next, we're joined by scholars and struggle veterans, Professors Bani Pityana and Musha Ngondo, who are going to weigh in on the hits and misses of this exercise, but more importantly, perhaps remind us of its importance for our country. Don't go away. What's in a name? Well, that's the question we're trying to answer tonight on this program, following Arts and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa's rejection of all objections to the heavily criticized name changes in the Eastern Cape. But now we're bringing in scholars and struggle veterans, Professors Bani Pityana and Musha Ngondo, who are going to weigh in on the hits and misses of this exercise as we have undertaken it over the past 27 years. But more importantly, perhaps remind us of its importance in the country. Professor Pityana, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. So listening to the conversations we had with the mayor of the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan Council and the chairperson of the Geographical Names Council, what immediately came to your mind as you were listening to that conversation?
I think I was pleasantly welcoming of the mayor's commitment and understanding of the imperative of name changes as a means for transformation. I just want to take that a little further than the mayor did. It's more than transformation in the sort of sense that we often take it to be. It actually is a lot deeper than that. It is about reclaiming the humanity of the people once again, and taking hold of the humanity of the people of this country. So they begin to own the place, they own the land, they begin to take ownership of their humanity once again. If you remember, for example, about the place that is called, the mayor calls Port Elizabeth, it was called Algoa Bay when the Portuguese really went past this place and put their cross in Port Croix, in Port Elizabeth, which became. And in 1820, when the British settlers came, Duncan, Sir Ruffin Duncan, they named it Port Elizabeth and removed the Algoa Bay, which was actually the name that was given by the Portuguese. So for all that time, from the time of the Portuguese to the time of the English and the British settlers, the naming had nothing to do with the people of the place, but had everything to do with the affirmations of conquest and superiority and coloniality of the people who actually didn't belong. So now what we are doing is to claim these places as places we belong. Now, that has a lot to do with whether it's transformation, because transformation can often be a very, very simple and simplistic thing. It is a lot deeper than that, because it talks very, very strongly to our humanity, reclaiming our humanity again and re-identifying ourselves with the land in which we live in. The second thing I want to say is that often when people really object to something for political or other reasons, they never put that up front. They will put other reasons like it's not affordable. The fact of the matter, I come from Port Elizabeth, it's my home, I was born here, I went to school here. So when they talk about money, I have to tell you that since 1994, this place was called Port Elizabeth. You go around today, this city, where has the money gone? Where is the money being spent? Why is the city in such a lamentable state as we speak? And so the connection between name changing and the provision of services actually don't match up together. And what happens to the money? Why is it that there is no water in Nelson Mandela Bay? What difference did it make that this place's name was called Nelson Mandela Bay in the 1991 or 1992 or something like that? So clearly, as far as I'm concerned, there is no match. At the end of the day, I say to Mayor Banga and others who argue like that what price do you put to the dignity of people, to their sense of belonging, to their connection to the places that actually mean so much to their ancestry? The third thing that is made by the mayor is the appropriateness of the name. Is it appropriate? I don't know, because I didn't consider any alternatives. I didn't see alternatives. Is it appropriate? What I'm saying is that it is appropriate to the extent that it represents something other than coloniality. It represents something of, as I say, I brought it in Port Elizabeth. Kabeka is not a new name. In fact, the Xhosa-speaking people of Port Elizabeth have always called Woma Township Kabeka. So there's a translation from Woma Township to the city. That's what Harare did. Harare, the name for the city of Salisbury, was actually a township in Salisbury. And so it's now actually Harare is the city of Salisbury itself. So it's not unheard of that actually the name, even then, Woma Township Kabeka was not an official name of Woma Township. The people of PE, if you like, would tell you that Kabeka was a name. In fact, there's choral music that has always been there. So I say to the mayor that it is in fact not true that this name is not evocative to the people of the area. It's not. You can't say it's a name that is totally unfamiliar to the people of the area. Not true. In fact, it represents something more of an affinity to the area, I suspect, much more than Nelson Mandela does. Because Nelson Mandela has very little or no connection to the city at all. So my view is that I don't know about consultation. I don't know how consultation was done. I just know that consultation takes many, many forms. I don't know if the form and the process that was undertaken by the Geographical Names Council was perfect. No idea. But what I do know, that it has taken us too long to change the name of this city. It should have happened a long time ago. Certainly it should have happened, bang, 1994, to change the name. Now, there are other things that are being mentioned by Mayor Banga that honestly are non sequitur. I mean, I don't understand what it has to do with tourism and all of that. I mean, we go all over the world. The names, I think Mr. Maluleke made that very, very clear, that the names have very little to do what other people think about the names, have got everything to do with the people of the place. It is the people of the place for whom the name has meaning, has resonance, has power, has an important meaning for them. Mm-hmm. As long as that is so, I don't think I have a problem. All I say that the name must change. I think it's a good thing.
Let's bring in Professor Nkondo. Prof, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Remind us of the importance of this exercise before we get into what has gone wrong, which is the reason why we're finding ourselves in this situation this evening on the back of the minister's acceptance of the council's recommendations around Port Elizabeth and Udinake and those areas.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. I'm sorry, West. I'm taking a hit. I think let me just put this in context. We worked on the Transformation Charter. We worked on the Road to Independence, program. We worked on the Wall of Remembrance in Freedom Park, and worked also on the National Heritage Sites list. I think internationally, naming and renaming are essentially a political process, particularly when a government comes about as a result of a revolution or a liberation struggle. Almost all the revolutionary movements worldwide use names, the naming of places, to introduce and hegemonize a new symbolic system. They use the naming of places at times of institutions to introduce and establish a new normative system. If that's why we have to move from Johannesburg Airport to our Tambo Airport, we move from the Investor Positive to the National Mandela Memorial. We move these names. Solomon Mahlangu, Steve Biko Hospital, Chris Hani, because the new government, the government in power, wants to create a new policy framework, a new system of norms that guide the people on how they should begin to relate to each other and to the world. They create a new mood through the renaming of places. In South Africa, given our history of apartheid, given our history of apartheid displacement to homelands, Bantustans, influx laws, given the history of displacement, place is very, very important. When you rename a place, you are reaffirming a sense of origins. You are reaffirming a sense of belonging, of redefining your place in history. You go to Australia, you go to China, for example. There was a time when Japan occupied part of China, and they renamed the university there as the University of Peking. When Chairman Mao recovered China, they renamed that university as the University of Beijing. Internationally, when the Afrikaners took over this country in 1948, there was Kruger Square, Fairwood, what have you. So this is something that is done internationally, and it's not unique here. So when a new name is decided upon, the name is not just a word; it's a way of saying to the people, you must move from where you have been to the next site of norms, the next site of freedom, the next site of agency is not just linguistic or semantic. It's a very powerful symbolic movement. I think it's important that that I see that.
Okay. Professor Pityana, I mean, if I'm...
Okay. But I think in a multi-party democracy, international, when you have a multi-party democracy, particularly after a revolution, the naming process at times becomes controversial because there are contestations in parliament. That's why we've had problems renaming Losrigat. That's why we have a problem renaming Pretoria. That's why we're having a problem now even renaming the Cape Town airport. It is a there are contestations. There's nothing new here. Okay.
Okay. Professor Pityana, going forward, how do we better handle this project in a manner that's going to, one, make sure that more and more people get to participate, but also they are very much conscious of what this exercise is about, as Professor Ngondo has just illustrated?
Thank you. I think once the principle is accepted, that there must be a change of name for all the reasons that we mentioned. And the second stage of that principle is that the name is identified. It is actually named. It's not just a vague conception. The third process, it seems to me, then, would be to set a timetable for giving effect to that position, taking account of two critical issues. One is the cost factor. How is the cost and what it takes going to be progressively applied in order to realize what is intended? Because part of the cost is not just billboards and signs and that sort of thing. It's about campaign. There must be a campaign that basically says who and what is Gqeberha, why Gqeberha, how does actually Gqeberha, what are the values and the principles that this city identifies with in the name Gqeberha.
In other words, it mustn't be a box-ticking exercise.
That's right. Not a box-ticking exercise, but we must then go through a process that the city and other people must be involved in. And how long, the timetabling for that process must also be agreed. So the issue for me, responsibly, doesn't mean that you just name thing and next thing, doesn't matter where the money comes from, bankrupt the city, bankrupt everything. It can't be. It's got to be a very procedural process just to make sure that this gets into the subconscious of the people of the city.
Quick last word from you, Professor Ngondo. How do we enrich this process going forward?
I think just to reinforce what Professor Pityana has said, as I said, I want to repeat, colleagues, this is essentially a political process, which means that sufficient consensus must be mobilized. But usually that consensus is mobilized within the framework of the new government. Usually a government that is led by the organization that drove the revolution. This is international. That in this case, I'm convinced that whatever regulations, codes, mechanics, timetables, at the end, the party in government, the ruling party in government, is going to determine the terms of the change, the naming, and the meanings attached to that name. Process, okay, but the fundamental thrust is that the party in government that ends its place after years of struggle has the responsibility and the prerogative to determine the names and the meanings attached to the new name. Thank you.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks to both Professor Pityana and Professor Ngondo for gracing us with their presence this evening. Thanks also to Pensani Maduleke, who is the chairperson of the National Geographic Names Council, as well as Mayor Naba Banga. That's all we have time for this evening. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.